Hi everyone. I just wanted to put together this video. It's a quick video on genres in academic and research writing, just to help you understand what the context is for writing in academic contexts. Okay, let's get going. So we use the term genre, and it's something we are more familiar with when it comes to movies or books. Things like going to watch a horror movie or a romantic comedy or an action adventure. When we go and watch one of those movies, we have expectations about what will happen, so the content, who the characters will be, how the story will play out, how it will begin, and how it will end. Although there might be variations within that general format, we are looking for a similar kind of story. So we might be looking for something new, but it would still follow that general format. So when we go and watch a horror movie, we want to be scared. And if the horror movie turns into a romantic comedy, we won't be happy as an audience because we had expectations of seeing a horror movie and experiencing that. Um, the same thing applies to academic writing. Audiences have expectations of certain things when you produce a particular piece of writing. And we write lots of different things in academic context, particularly across the disciplines. And over time, we've got used to particular kinds of formats, and with that come the expectations of the reader. And the expectations of the reader tend to drive the genre. So now, if you go to a horror movie and it turns out to be a soppy romance, then you'll get agitated and angry because that's not what you wanted. So when an academic reader reads something that doesn't follow the genre, that's exactly what they experience. And that's when the red pen comes out. So genres have common purposes. The what they're intending to do is generally common. They have similar structures and formats, they have similar styles or tones, and down to the word level, they have similar language. Now, there are lots of different kinds of genres within academic writing. Um, the one that we work on the most is the research paper, which has a number of different genres within it as well. But, all kinds of lab reports, if you're in engineering or in the sciences. Um, in education, you get asked to write conceptual papers or position papers or review papers. Um, and these days, there's a lot of social media genres as well. So it's just to give you an idea of the variety of different ways that we write, but also that each of these different ways has particular expectations from from a reader's perspective. And what I want to do just generally is to break it down into these different levels because we can look at genre on the macro level where we're saying, okay, the way we write in academic context is very different from the way we write in, say, journalism or other contexts, politics, for example. And then you can even break down the macro genre into, other kinds of academic writing versus research writing, which is focused on collecting data. But that's the macro kind of genre. Then you have medium level genres, and this comes down to the specific writing products. So that would be a research article. And within a research article, we also have micro genres. So the way an introduction is written, for example, has very common features. The way the conclusion is written has common features. So, and those have evolved over time. For example, if you don't provide an introduction, then your reader's left floundering. What is this about? What is the purpose? why are you writing this? So those kinds of questions have evolved into these genres because readers need to know that. And then, of course, we go down to the word level because even the language we use fits in with particular genres. So to understand this, we need to think about, yeah, I'm calling it a worldview here, but really what we're looking at is a disciplinary language. And, within disciplines, there will be particular kinds of genres. The research paper written in engineering, for example, will be very different from a research paper written in history. So those disciplinary worldviews affect what goes into that particular document. And what I mean by worldview is what kind of knowledge is valued, is it objective? Is it subjective? And I'm being simplistic there, but it helps you to understand what I'm talking about. So, what are the philosophical orientations of the genre, and what are the values in terms of knowledge and evidence of that discipline? So that's the macro genre. If you're working within engineering, there's a certain way of writing that is, generally much more objective, more problem solving. Whereas in education, even though there might be a macro genre of classroom practice, like writing in our field is more focused on classroom practice, there are also sub-disciplines within education that might not be the same. So if you're in the more quantitative areas of education, the writing will be more science-like. If you're in the more qualitative areas of education, the writing will be more social science-like. So the medium level would be the types of papers, and that would be essay, research paper, etc. And then the micro level would be the sections within those papers. And then at the word level, we're looking at, can you use active language, passive language? Do you use I? So all of them align. So they fit within each other. And one of the things to understand, I mean, we think in a generative text AI world, that writing is really transparent and just a means of reporting. But really, when we write within a discipline, we are portraying not only our own identity, but the discipline's identity, and that comes through in the genre. Okay. So again, just to recap this, mostly because you may not have come across this before, at the macro level, we're talking about the discipline's ideology, the ontology, and the epistemology of that particular discipline. Do they value more objective knowledge? Do they value subjective knowledge? What is valued as evidence and what counts as knowledge? At the medium level genre, we're talking about the types of papers that are linked to disciplines. For example, you wouldn't find lab reports in history because that's not something they do in that discipline. So looking at the types of papers, reflective papers, you'll see much more in education, where we're looking at how we can change classroom practice, right? So the types of medium level genres you'll get, the types of papers are reflective of the discipline. And then down to the different sections within a paper, there are often general agreements. Readers have expectations about what needs to appear in each of those sections. These are not rules, they're not hard and fast rules because, genres change all the time because we are writing in a dynamic environment. What I mean by that is the reader's expectations change. The writer might want to be pushing the boundaries. So these are not fixed things. They change. But if you're able to recognize them, you're able to adapt as they change. And then down to the word level, use of I, what tense you use, and other language rules or Okay, I won't go through that again. That was just a recap. So to give you an example, if we look at engineering, at the macro level, we're looking at disciplinary values around objectivity, but engineering is very pragmatic, very focused on problem-solving methods. So you will see, if you look at engineering papers, they're really focused on solving problems rather than on philosophical interactions, although, there's a lot of philosophy involved in engineering as well. But the basis of their approach is more problem solving. And the one thing that emerges as being really important in engineering is the materials being used. So that will feed into the medium level genre. And often you'll find a section in the medium level instead of IMRAD, which is a very common genre format. And IMRAD stands for Introduction, Method, Results, and Discussion. What you'll find in engineering is that there'll be a section on materials as well. So readers expect a section on materials. The language will be neutral and objective. At the micro level, you'll find lots of technical writing, project write-up, lab reports, as well as research papers. The language is much more formal. Passive tense is often used. Very little use of I, but often the use of we. And the idea is to report on the research. Whereas in the humanities, if you take the humanities, the whole philosophy behind the field is different. Here we're looking at interpretation, we're looking at critical engagement with secondary sources. So secondary sources count as substantial evidence, they are valued as evidence. We're looking at a critical layering of argument. At the medium level, the types of papers you're likely to get are more essay, argumentative essays, and the language is persuasive and tries to construct the reader in a particular way. At the micro level, you tend to get more essay type papers and the components that would go into an essay, particularly the argument. Arguments can be seen as a genre as well because they have particular elements. For example, arguments often contain counter arguments because the academic reader wants to see that you have considered alternative positions. So that would be an example of a micro genre within this field. The language is very different from engineering. There's often a lot of rhetorical devices where the writer tries to persuade the reader, uses I, is creative, and often uses evocative language. So what does this all mean? Genres are context specific, so they're context specific in terms of the discipline, but they are also context specific in terms of a subdiscipline. If you're working in an interdisciplinary project, you would need to meet the needs of all those disciplines. So it's specific to that interaction. It can also be specific to, contexts like North America or different geographical areas as well. If you can recognize the genre, if you begin to look at the genre, then you can begin to frame your writing to meet the reader expectations. Again, it's not about rules. It's not about learning formulas or rules. And this is where I think, AI generated writing falls down in that it is working to rules and patterns. Our writing tends to be a response to audience expectations. So genres do change over time, but also writers push boundaries. Just because the genres are there doesn't mean that we have to follow them religiously. Okay, so I just wanted to introduce this idea of moves. And this comes from linguistics and applied linguistics, where people have done these enormous studies of different sections, the micro level genres, They've done analyses of different sections within different kinds of papers, and they've worked out the most commonly met reader expectations. So again, these are not rules. You won't need these for every single paper, but these are the common expectations of a reader for most academic papers, but generally for research papers. And it would be an orientation for the reader to the topic, an introduction to the problem that is going to be addressed in this piece of writing, possibly outlining an argument. In some disciplines, the argument would be deeply embedded and would not be posed up front, but other disciplines, the argument is established right up front. You would definitely have a purpose statement because that answers your reader's question, why do I need to read this? And then a roadmap for the reader, which basically would say, this is how I'm going to go about doing this. I'm going to address this first and then move on to the next thing. Now, you don't have to do it in this order. You might not keep all the components, but these are the general components that go into an introduction. Okay. That's just a very brief introduction to genres in academic writing. Um, there are lots of debates around genres, so it's not a kind of static field, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what you're looking at, when you're reading, but also when you're writing. And I hope this was helpful. Thanks for your time. Bye.